Thursday. So today you are going to start writing a narrative. So I'm going to show you and go through all the steps that you need to do and specific tips that you might want to keep in mind as you're writing this narrative. Okay, so let me show you. Okay, so you're going to find this document attached to your assignment today, and it's basically your narrative assignment. Okay, so you can include the events that happen in the city of Ember and talk about them in your story, like the blackouts and things that actually happen in the city of Ember. But your story is about your own character, not Luna's routines. So the events that happen in the story should be your own. Okay? So you're creating a completely different story that fits on the larger story of the city of Ember. Second thing to remember is you can implement other people in the story from class. So for example, you can collaborate together. It means you still need to write your own story, but the events could be similar. So for example, if you're a messenger and someone is a timekeeper's helper, you can have one story where you just move together, something big happens, and both of you are involved. But you will need to write your own different stories from your perspective, but events could be similar. So you can start talking to somebody in your class and you can collaborate on a story and come up with a plot. Number 3, you're going to have to choose a perspective. So I'm going to go over this in a little bit in more detail. So first, are you going to write it from your perspective, as in your character? Are you going to say you, I, we? Second perspective, are you telling the story about somebody else? So another hero in the story is going to tell about somebody else. And that would mean that you don't necessarily know what's going on in their head, but you know what happened to them. And then there's a third person, narrator telling the story, and she knows all about the characters and what they think and do. So it's sort of like a godlike narrator who knows all the thoughts and what happened. Okay, so these 3 things to keep in mind as you begin drafting your story. So first you want to make a plan. What kind of characters do you have? Where is it happening? Now we know it's happening in a larger city of Ember, but where specifically is it happening? In a house, on a street, down below? Is it dark? Is it light? Describe the setting. And then what conflict? What's going to happen in your story? Is there something dramatic that's going to happen? I'm going to go over conflict in just a little bit as well. And then you could use this plot, the top, or this box below to kind of plan out your story. Okay, after you finish that, you may begin writing your story below this or in your own separate documents. Okay, so a few things about conflict and about perspective, okay, and resolution. So last time we talked about characters and dialogue and how to use it. So today, we'll talk about conflict. Now, there's different kinds of conflict in the story. We have character versus character. Character where there's an enemy and the other person is, let's say, another person, right? We've read books like this before. Character versus nature is when something big is happening, like a disaster. So the book that you read, Hatchet, last year was a character versus nature. And you guys might remember this from last year with Mr. Michael. Character versus society, where a character thinks that they need to stand up against society in some way because society is doing bad things. So maybe like Anne Frank, even though like society at that time was like Nazis trying to kill all the Jews, right? So this would be a character versus society. But also Anne Frank could also be a character versus self, where she is kind of growing out of herself, and herself is the enemy, right? These are the 4 main ones, and then we have sometimes in science fiction we have character versus technology, where technology becomes kind of the enemy, and then we have something like character versus supernatural, so like scary movies, ghosts, monsters, things like that. Okay, you absolutely need to have a conflict. Your story cannot be without one. Your story can't be just like, oh, I went to school and I had fun there. Okay, there is no drama. You need to have a story that has some kind of tension, some sort of conflict, some kind of drama. Something happens. That's the climax of the story. Okay, and in terms of perspective, as I said before, first person will be the hero telling the story. Second person is the hero's friend or close relation, or a person who has overheard, witnessed the situation, is telling the story. And third person is an ever-present godlike narrator, is telling a story who knows the feelings and thoughts of each character. Okay. Finally, a note on the resolution. Your story has to solve the conflict that you gave it. You can't just leave the drama. You have to somehow resolve it, okay? The character's real-life story might not end, but you need to conclude it in a small piece. So, right? Like, it's not like you have to write the life story of your character. A little small part of it, and that small drama part has to come to some sort of conclusion, resolution, okay? So hopefully these 3 things make a little bit more clear about your story. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about snapshots and thought shots, and how to use creativity. Now I'm going to include this in your PDF along with the rest of it, but I'm going to talk about these two tomorrow, okay? If you can use them, if you know what they are, but you don't have to do them just yet. Finally, what I'm going to include in here is this little PDF of 10 things to remember in writing a narrative. You have just a few kind of reminders that you already know and that I already went over, but it's just another resource for you to have. Okay, so things that you can use that you already know, like, make sure that you capitalize and punctuate, make sure you use rich words. The examples for you, make sure you use, there's a few different words that you can substitute instead of saying good, bad, thing, big, small, important. Use these words. There is show, don't tell, which I kind of talked to you about. There's also conversation, how to write direct quotations. You have that. Sentences, figurative language. So this is the one that you guys kind of can start implementing in your story because all good writers use figurative language. Okay? And then you have examples for each one. So hopefully this helps. So hopefully that helps you, and what you're going to do right now is basically start writing your story. If you have any more questions, just send them to me or email it to me. Just remember all the rules. So just to repeat, you are using your role and creating a story about the city of Ember using yourself as a main character. Okay, and then choosing to write whether first, second, or third person perspective. In terms of length, your story doesn't have to go over a page, single-spaced. Okay, so 12-point font, single page. You don't need to go more than that. You can if you want to, but it can't be shorter than that. Okay, so please keep that in mind.